Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we get to sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players and related music industry experts. If you love playing guitar, stick around. You're in the right place. Hey everybody, this is Craig Garber from Everyone Loves Guitar, and we got a really cool bass player on the show. We're going to show some love to the rhythm section today. We're with the awesome Joe Karnes from Fitz The Tantrums. If you don't know Fitz The Tantrums, they have 3 major label indie pop LPs out. Joe's an awesome player and a very cool guy. He started playing bass at age 12. At 19, he joined a band. He started really digging in and woodshedding, studying players like Jack Bruce, who's just absolutely amazing. John Paul Jones is amazing. The whole list of like awesome guys. James Jamerson, Les Claypool of Primus, and Jaco Pastorius. At 23, he auditioned for and joined a new band being formed by Roger Manning and Eric Dover of the band Jellyfish. That band became Imperial Drag, and they signed to Work Records, a subsidiary of Columbia, releasing a self-titled album in '96 and touring the world. After that band ended, Joe transitioned into a session bass player, and he was working with sidemen that he hired for loads of artists around the LA area, and including he joined the band Merrick with childhood friend Inar George of Bird and the Bee fame. This is like a tongue twister here, sorry.
Yeah.
And hip-hop band Blood of Abraham. In 2003, he joined the Ben Taylor Band. Ben is the son of James Taylor and Carly Simon. And he recorded and toured the world with them for the next 3 years, as well as playing with Carly. In 2005, he joined Velvet Underground co-founder John Cale, and their band had a 5-year run of touring and recording, including making the live album called Circus Live. We'll talk a little bit about that experience today. In 2010, while touring with the band Five for Fighting and also touring with Men at Work's Colin Hay, Joe joined Fitz The Tantrums, and they're out of LA as well. That band continues to this day. Again, 3 albums and 9 years of touring. And when not on tour or making albums with Fitz The Tantrums, Joe continues recording and writing in Los Angeles and spending time with his family, which is a wife and daughter. Other artists Joe's worked with include Aloe Blacc, KT Tunstall, Pixie Geldof, Minnie Driver, Hanson, Pete Yorn, Pedestrian, Blood of Abraham, Lily Holbrook, and her album Everything Was Beautiful and Nothing Hurt. Is that a remake, or a lot of people have done that song, I think, right? Or that?
Oh, the Lily Holbrook thing?
Yeah.
No, I think that's one of those things, like a song, like Just the Way You Are. There's a few different songs, Just the Way You Are, and they're totally different.
Interesting.
Billy Joel and Bruno Mars and stuff like so. Yeah, I think it's just her own. There was an album of originals.
Oh, yeah. Very cool. I love that title. Everything Was Beautiful and Nothing Hurt. Joe's also played on recordings alongside Vinny Colaiuta, who's just an amazing drummer, Richie Hayward, Joey Roniker, James Gadsden, Lyle Workman, Louis Conte, Jeff Pivar, Steve DeStanislaw, who's played with David Gilmour, and many others. Film and television sessions include the movie Arthur, The Hangover 2, Sons of Anarchy, Smokin' Aces, great movies, and his bass playing has been featured on national television shows including Dismissed, which is on MTV, In Gear on the Warner Brothers Network, and loads of others. He's appeared on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, The George Lopez Show, Late Night with Conan O'Brien, Last Call with Carson Daly, Jimmy Kimmel Live, The Today Show, The View, Good Morning America. One of my favorite shows of all time, Later with Jules Holland, Sharon Osbourne, and loads of others. He's also appeared performing alongside Rod Stewart. He was featured in Bass Player magazine multiple times, and he's played at festivals including Sasquatch Fest, Lollapalooza, Central Park Summer Stage, Montreal Jazz Fest, Splendor in the Grass in Australia. I'm going to mess this up, Joe. Puckle Pop, is that right?
Puckle Pop. I mean, basically every festival that they have out there, I've played now.
Boom. That's that. And then a couple of them I could say easily, which is Austin City Limits and a bunch of others. Yeah. He's endorsed by Aguilar Amps, Yamaha Basses, D'Addario Strings, and Planet Wave Cables. Joe, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on the show today, man.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, man. At 23... you get your first major label gig with Imperial Drag, and like next thing you're touring all over the world. I was curious, how'd you get that audition, and what were you doing immediately before that?
Yeah, well, I was, I think I was finishing up or just had finished up college. I actually got a degree in environmental studies of all things.
Good for you. Plan B.
Yeah. And then was playing music on the side. I was like, I've always felt like I didn't want to get molded into like a cookie cutter player, which was really a misguided notion about, education. I was like, oh, I could go to like a music school or I could transfer. I was like originally an acting student at UCLA. And then I was like, oh, I could do music or I could just take private lessons. And then I could also learn something else about the world. So I chose that. Any musicians listening, education and learning more about your craft is always a great thing. I do wish I'd done more of that. But it worked out for me so far, so I'm doing all right. So I was finishing that up and then, just starting to play around with some different people around town, really getting my feet wet with, being someone who was playing other music and not just being in my high school band or something like that, bands with friends. And a drummer named Mark Danzeisen, who used to be in like the Bullet Boys and a bunch of other hard rock bands in the 80s, was a friend and someone who had seen me play with some other friends of his and had just, liked my style and thought it might work well with what was going on. And he was going to be the original drummer in the project. So he's the one that kind of hooked it up and introduced me to Roger Manning. And Roger came to my house and, we like jammed on my piano and a bass. And, he looked at like the posters on my wall, which were like everything he was exactly going for. And so he's like, all right. And he even looked at my wardrobe because, looked at my closet, was like, oh, well, we can fix that.
Oh my God, that's funny.
Well, because if you ever saw Jellyfish was it was a head to toe image.
Okay.
It was sonically, it was all the stuff. And so this was another thing where it's like the entire package was important.
Yeah.
And, it comes from that school of rock and roll that, where it was a performance, and not so much the Allman Brothers Band, which is one of my favorites, but, where they're just like downplay the stuff, listen to the music. It was more, this project was going for more of a 70s glam, even with not so like Gary Glitter, but, little more rock edge to it. So
sure.
The look had a thing to it. And then, but it was fun. We just kind of like played like, like Elton John and, God, what's his name? Was it Dee Murray? I forgot.
Dee Murray is a bass player, right?
Yeah. Basically, I met up with Roger. We jammed, and then he was like, "Okay, I really like your stuff. Come on down to the audition." And so we just went and jammed for like, I got some tunes that they'd been demoing up, and we jammed for a little bit, and we walked out the door, and they said, "You want to do it?" And I was like, "Sounds great." It was definitely, I was definitely playing with the big boys at that point. It really felt like, because these guys were all like 5, 6 years older than me, and had already done it in Jellyfish. They'd already made 2 records and had been, living the life for, a good 7, 8 years. And their musicality was insane. The songs they're writing, the harmonies they were singing. I had no idea how to sing. I'd get drilled in, like boot camp style, like singing songs like Nowhere Man or Crosby, Stills and Nash to learn how to sing harmony, because there's everyone in the band.
That's pretty tough. That's baptism by fire, man.
Oh, it was great. I mean, it was such an awesome education. But these guys were, I was definitely like, when they needed the fourth voice, I would come in, because the other three guys, and the drummer Mark eventually wasn't able to do that project. So then they got Eric Scotus, who's a great drummer and a fabulous singer. And so that became what the band is. And they could all sing, and they had all been, gigging and doing it for years. So it was really awesome.
So that was a great, the right place, right time, and right guy. What was the?
Oh, that's half the deal, man.
That's what. That's what.
That's half the deal. The right place, right time, and just be ready.
What was the good and the bad about going from like basically not zero, but 0 to 100, and for lack of a better term, overnight, pretty much?
I don't know. It was really weird. I had this. I remember because at the same time, Eric Dover was also recording Slash's Snake Pit record. He was a singer in that project. So he was a little late to the audition because he was like finishing up a recording session with them, and he came in and guy looked like rock and roll, smelled like rock and roll, but I was also like, I hadn't really done any like hard drugs or anything like that. So there was one little trepidation in my mind of like, am I going to become a cocaine addict? I don't know. Which was absolutely not the case. This is a serious, hardworking band, but I just had that kind of weird vision. Other than that, it was, a dream come true. Everyone, all I wanted to do is be playing and working. And, these guys were super hard workers. They were writing every day and demoing up these amazing songs. And then, and once I joined the band, I was able to, join in on the demo process and, the arranging process of these tunes. And, and they really let me do what I wanted to do within it, but then also shaped where, like I would go for, a take and then be like, all right, that sounds good. Now let's refine that. And let's really find, like, I really like this part and this part that you played. Let's try to make that a thing. And also like teach me some licks and stuff like, like walking up the major 10th, boom, boom, ba-da-dum. It's a really fun little trick on the bass and all sorts of stuff like that. It was just really, really fascinating. And I was still fairly new to recording as well.
Yeah.
So even just recording the demos, it was, you just really had to be on because back then, like they were recording to ADAT, so there is no like, punching in on that kind of stuff is a little difficult. So like do it in a take, do the whole song in a take. And then even when it took forever, there was a lot of delays. So we didn't make the record for like another year or so. Because when I joined the band, there was no deal.
Okay.
They had finished up over with I think it was Virgin where Jellyfish was, and they had kind of a development deal through Jeff Carlisi and Jordan Harris, who were with Work Records and who I think were working to work the Jellyfish record. So they were already fans of the guys and the tunes they were writing. So eventually, once there was the right batch of songs, then the band got signed, and then we in that time Eric Dover had to go and do. He had committed to like a 4 or 6 month tour with Slash's Snake Pit, which actually it turned out to be a good thing. At the time, it seemed like a real pain in the butt. You're like, oh, we just got this thing together. We got all the guys, and now we got to kind of sit on our hands and wait. But what it did was allowed more time for the sound of the band to develop.
Okay.
It was going down this kind of Black Crowes realm, which I love, and it was really awesome. But then it actually developed into something a little more unique than just, and doing what they were doing, because they were pretty fresh out there. They were like on their second or third record when we were starting out, so they were, still hitting it hard. So we've already got a Black Crowes. We don't need another Black Crowes.
Sure.
But Eric Dover's voice could pull that Chris Robinson vibe out. He sounds like Rod Stewart and Chris Robinson kind of. He's amazing.
Pretty good combo.
Yeah. So eventually we got to go and make the record, and so that time off really was well spent developing the sound, and and we got to go into a full studio for like 2 or 3 months and dive in every day and experiment. I had 3 amps set up, and a DI, and everything was cut to tape. This is just before Pro Tools was really starting to happen. I think it was happening, but it wasn't really, I think my first time working on Pro Tools wasn't till like 97, like when we were trying to start making our second record. So I was learning all this stuff. We were doing like all sorts of tricks. We're like, let's slow the tape machine down to get that kind of sound for this one section. And, and you could punch in on there, but you really had to like play well and play evenly and play consistently throughout, because, there's no like, we can just kind of raise the level of this one note or fix it in post, or there's no fixing it at post. There's no moving notes around like you do in Pro Tools these days. It's like you play it right or you don't. Or we got to take it again, and you can't take it. You don't want to take it too many times, because if you're like going for 30 or 40 takes on a part, you're wearing out the tape,
Totally get that. So it was a real good maturing period for you as a player. And so that by the time you went out on tour, you probably had a lot more confidence in what you were doing.
You would think, but no, and I say that because of the fact that we had never played live. We never played shows.
Yeah, okay.
We made the record before we had played a gig. the band was signed based on the pedigree and the songs,
right.
the catalog that was being written, and not on. They knew that they could pull off a live show, but it was still it was very interesting. That I forget if anyone even came down to like a rehearsal. They may have, but they may not have. I don't remember that. So when we actually finished the record, and then it was time to go on tour, our first tour was opening up for Alanis Morissette on her Jagged Little Pill tour. And it was a year into that record's life. So, she had just blown up. She was on her like third single or something. So it was her first arena tour. So we were going, our first actual tour was going to be playing arenas. I had played clubs, tiny clubs with like 50 people my entire life. And we'd never played as a band. So I think we had like maybe 7 local gigs, warm-up gigs, like clubs like the Whiskey or the Roxy. No, it was the Roxy we played. And, just some small places just to kind of get our feet wet. And then we had to go and play in an arena full of, screaming teenage girls who just wanted to hear Alanis Morissette.
How did that, were you able to process all that as you were going around the world, or?
Oh, dude, it was crazy. Well, that was like a 3 or 4 week national tour for there, but it was interesting because I remember like the week before the tour was starting, I was like, oh man, am I going to be nervous on stage? No, I'll be fine. It's just playing for people, and it's going to be great. But then as the week was going on, I was starting to get more butterflies in my stomach, and then we're driving up, and we had to drive. The first show was in Portland, and I live in Los Angeles, so we had a big drive, like a 2-day drive, and we're just kind of driving up, and I was like, oh, it's going to be cool. It's going to be cool. I'm going to be good. And then we pull into Portland the night before and we pull into the hotel and go get some dinner. And the dinner had the restaurant had these windows that opened up across the river, and you could see it was at the Rose Garden where the Trailblazers play in the NBA. Wow. And I see this giant thing off in the distance, and I couldn't eat my dinner that night. And I was just, oh my God, this is horrible. And then, and then cut to the next day, we go drive in there, and I'm nervous driving in, and then we pull up to the loading docks, and there's like 7 semi trucks there, and I think we had like a Winnebago, and then another truck with our gear, like a U-Haul or something with our techs, and we pull in there, and I was like, oh, it's just a place. And then I walked in, and they hadn't even put the seats down on the floor yet, and the band, Alanis's band, was sound checking. And I just walk into the middle of this thing, and, the arenas are always deceptive. They seem huge, but then they also seem more intimate to me than they really are. If you actually just stop and look around, you're like, oh, I can see the top seats. I can see people there. And so as soon as I got in there, I relaxed and was like, oh, this is all it is. It's just being on a stage. The biggest adjustment was the distance that we were at on stage together.
Oh, amongst the band.
Yeah, and this is before in-ear monitors. Yeah. So I had like I had my wedges, but it was just to get used to that sound and also to learn how to take up that amount of space energetically. There was only 4 of us in the band, so on stage left was Roger with his giant keyboard rig, like a la Rick Wakeman, It was like, and then we had our frontman Eric, and then I was over on stage right, and that was. I only took a couple shows to kind of get used to the thing, but it definitely, to own a stage like that is, it takes a little getting used to, and how to project that larger energy. It's still something I'm not learning how to project the energy, but learning how to play at that scale and with that kind of venue. Those venues are so big, and they're so it's so hard, especially for a bass player, to get the sound to be accurate. There's so many subs, there's bass traps everywhere there. You can't hear the definition, especially as a bass player, of what the bass is doing half the time. Yeah. So, one of the things that I think I've figured it out by now, but it is that thing of like, all right, all those cool licks you're playing, unless you've got unless there's like not a lot going on, they're going to get lost to a lot of people. So when you're playing the arenas, one thing I learned is like, play a little less and make the notes count a little bit more. So it's things like that I didn't know. Because in Imperial Drag, it was very, the music was very much based in, and the bass approach was very much based in the players that I loved growing up, like you mentioned, Jack Bruce and John Paul Jones. You know, it's like I always came up like, man. Yeah, I came up playing like in like kind of power trio vibes, you know, in the beginning. So I learned how to take up a lot of space as a bass player. I really liked playing very active bass. So there's a lot of, you know, kind of walking bass lines and stuff going on there. And it was really fun to play, but you know, I don't know how much actually translated out there to the people, you know, in that band, you know, it's like there's not much I could have done because these parts were all so composed, you know, and everything was integral. And, you know, there's the harmonies blended with the bass notes, with the guitar blended with the drums and the bass, you know, it's like, as it does, but it kind of interwove in a bit more of a complex nature than just kind of say, you know, I don't know why I'm thinking about her, but like Joan Jett, you know, which is a little more straight ahead rock.
Yeah.
You know,
let me ask you this. I never thought of that. That's an interesting thing about taking up the space, but how did you also, like, as it is, you're not a new band, but you're new as far as playing out live. How do you communicate with each other when when you're not in a club? You can kind of like give actually come close to the other person and talk to them even. How do you do that on an arena level?
I mean, you just play and you just nail it and do your best and you talk about it afterwards, kind of, you know. I mean, you can also as an opener, you got like 30 to 45 minutes. So just to say your thing, people are still coming in, you know, to the arenas. So you're playing to like with her thing, it was just completely sold out. Everyone is excited. So, you know, people are showing up, and even like no one cares who, you know, our song had barely made it even out to radio yet. So we were a completely unknown thing. It just so happened that, you know, our record got to Alanis and she really dug it. It was like, oh great. Yeah. Let's bring these guys out, you know, and she, you know, was still in that era where she was so big. She didn't have to do any favors for the label. It was just, she could do what she wanted.
Yeah. And, that's so cool.
Yeah. So, as far as communicating on stage, I mean, you know, it's a glance, it's a look, but it is also just nailing it. You know, you rehearse and you hope for the best. And, you know, everyone's just, you know, professional. It's one thing you really learn real fast is like, you know, hit it or quit it.
Yeah. Do you get nervous or do you get jitters now before you go on stage?
No.
I mean, really?
No, the only times I may do it is if we're doing like a live TV thing and it's like we're just brand new on a song. And if it's a song that's kind of like a little complex, I might get a little bit of that edge going on before I go on, just to make sure. Because especially on like the TV things, it's, you know, you're not just looking down and playing. I mean, you could, but that's not what especially Fitz the Tantrums is about. It's projecting energy, it's getting people involved. And so, you know, you're just looking up more and it's a different thing. So you're trying to do, you know, wear a couple hats, you know, you're patting your head and rubbing your tummy at the same time.
Sure.
So that's really the only spot, you know, but then after you do a couple of those and you know, it also depends on the song. Like there's some songs that we have that are, you know, kind of no brainers. I don't have to, really look or do any real reference points.
Like your big hits, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, that's all you do on the TV shows anyway. Yeah.
True.
So yeah, but I mean, it even affected how I shaped. Like when we do hand clap, I first started playing it in one position on the neck, and then I realized, oh, how about if I just switch it and I switch it to a different position to keep all the notes all in one spot on the neck, you know, and it, you know, and specifically for TV, and then it just kind of became the way I played it. Because I was like, oh, if I just put it here, I don't have to do any jumps on the neck, and I can just like, you know, get up and sing and you know, look up and engage the audience.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
It's good that you have. I think all these things are kind of cool. That like, you know, even though, you know, you still got to think. You know, you still got to expand and improve yourself as a player with these little kind of challenges.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's every time you go and get on the stage, you know, it's a real thing, and no matter how comfortable you get, like that's one of the things that I work on these days. You know, like I've been in this band, Fitz the Tantrums, for like 9 years now. And, our sets are, they'll adjust here and there, but, we've kind of got our thing down, per album cycle, and we do some subtle adjustments there, but it's, we are playing, roughly, we're picking from a batch of like maybe 22 songs total. And so that challenge after you've done like in the middle of a 10-week tour is to stay fresh and stay frosty every day. Cause like with this band, I know this stuff, I could play it blindfolded behind my back. But that's not, that's the challenge. There's always something new to do. The challenge is to be present and play the song like you're playing it for the first time on your 300th time playing it, Yeah. That's something that I remember our drummer had mentioned. We were on tour with Bruno Mars, and his drummer Bruno's drummer is his brother Eric. And I remember our drummer was talking to him, and he was just saying like, man, you're such a good player. I mean, how do you do? He's like, man, it's just, just my whole focus is to just play the set the exact same way every night. And what that means is like full intensity and, making it sound like it's fresh in all these little moments that, if you've seen the show for a month, you go, oh, I know exactly when this is coming up, but you still want it to feel like a surprise to the audience. And that was just one of those lessons, because that band is one of the best bands playing out there, bar none. Every single guy on the stage, the performance, the musicianship, there's something some guys we really learned from, as far as like, oh, that's, it's kind of like, modern day James Brown, as far as like how they held each other's feet to the fire on like, like they would go back and like listen, they were videoing everything. And so, every day they'd go back and like watch portions of the performance and go, how can we make that better? How can we make it better? Nonstop.
Wow. So they're like a freaking football team or basketball team or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's, it was
pretty cool.
And that's why if you go and see Bruno Mars, like the music or not, you're going to see one of the best shows out there.
Interesting. My wife saw him when he was in town here. I'm going to say 6 to 8, maybe 6 months to a year ago. And she loved it. She said it was a fantastic show. Did you open for them here?
Yeah.
In Tampa?
No, I don't. I'm trying to think if this is our 2 records ago. So this was
it was a while ago. Yeah. This was like in the last 6 to 8 months, I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't think we made it. Yeah, I don't think we made it to Florida. We kind of did 2 weeks. It was his summer tour. We did like 2 weeks in the beginning and 2 weeks at the end, and then Ellie Goulding was doing the middle dates.
Gotcha.
So I'm not sure, but yeah, it was like all to come back to the point is you're always learning. There's always something you can get better at. It's just sometimes you need to just keep exploring. That's what that's one of the gifts of music, is that it's, as long as you want to feed it, it will feed you.
Yeah, keep exploring. Keep asking questions. I think that's a healthy thing in any, whether music business or whatever you're doing. That's really important, man. Basically, I had the same question for Fitz and the Tantrums. How'd you get the gig there?
That gig was one of the important ways of getting gigs. It was similar to the Imperial Drag one, but I was just further along in my career and just knowing people and being ready. I was actually the original bass player. This fabulous player named Ethan Phillips was doing the gig, and it was all like kind of local club gigs. There was no record deal or anything like that. And he recommended me because he was, a busy working player. He was in bands. He was playing with other people. Like when you're doing it, you're wearing a lot of hats, and especially as like a session player, is just like say yes to everything.
Sure.
And so he just couldn't make a bunch of the gigs, and there were like 6 months into the life of the band, I played our first gig at this tiny club called Three of Clubs out here in Los Angeles, and it's like a bar where everyone is right on top of you, and and it was so that's how it kind of started. He recommended me, and then
as a sub.
Yeah, just as a sub.
Wow.
Come on in and cover the gig. And I was like, great. So I went and learned it. And it was also music that I'd been wanting to play in that style. Back in the inception of the band, it had a much more Motown feel, and it was definitely a party band. And I had been up until that point in moodier bands, rock bands, and playing with singer-songwriters, and but not a lot of like super funk bands. Or it's not really a funk band, but like party bands with music that people can dance to.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
and have a great time. And so I was really excited to do the gig, and it was music that I was immersed in. It was of a style that is that was definitely prominent in the LA music scene, like kind of like the rare groove, old soul vibe. There's a lot of people out here in town that still to this day are just making fabulous new music, but paying homage to some of the lesser known soul stars and rare groove stars of the 70s and 60s. So yeah, I just played the gig a couple times, and I was really stoked on it. And like I think he actually got injured in a bizarre whale watching accident, unfortunately.
Wait a minute, he got in a whale watching accident.
Yeah, it was just like on Hawaii, like the whale came up and breached, and he and his wife flew up and then landed back in the boat and like hurt them back.
Smokes.
Not cool. So he was out for like another month. And there was a month when the band had a residency and had some gigs. So I kind of got to dive in. I had like 8 gigs over the course of that month. So I kind of got to dive in and get to know everyone. I already knew a couple of the people for many years. I liked our keyboardist. We went to high school together and stuff.
Cool.
But, I just got to dive into the music a little more, and they got to see what I do. And then, it still was another, 4 or 5 months in that time. Then he came back, and they finally went to South by Southwest and played a showcase and actually got a record deal. Like the big thing that you're always hoping to do, and got a record deal with a local indie label out of LA called Danger Bird, which has bands like Silver Sun Pickups and trying to think, Minus the Bear and Seawolf, some cool stuff. But so then the band was having was getting signed. The record was already kind of done. It was like basically culled from the demos that Fitz had been working on, and that some of the band had played on, and that stuff he'd done on his first EP before the band was even formed. And then they kept calling me because Ethan kept being unavailable for things, and even I was unavailable for a bunch of the things because I was gigging. I was playing at the time. I was playing with Five for Fighting, and then started playing with Colin Hay, and I was actually even playing a little bit, jamming with Ron Adams. Kind of on what didn't turn out to be a project, but was going to be a band for a little bit. And so I kind of had all these things going on, and I was like, oh, and then, a bunch of things that could be good. And so basically at a certain point, like they had this whole summer of tours coming up, and then Ethan couldn't do those tours because he was touring with I think an artist named Brett Denon. That or his band. He had a lot of things going on. So then they asked me to join up, and I was like, that sounds good. Make sure that Ethan has first right of refusal. Like I want him to say, I'm not going to do the gig. I'm not going to take my buddy's gig. So he's like, so they did that. And, he was just like, I think at the time he was busy and happy to do what he was doing. So then I joined the band, and was still tentative about it because even though the music was great, there was no money. I happened to have that summer free, so I was like, I'll do the gigs. And I really love this vibe. But I had also just been in a band for the last 5 years before that. And I was playing with John Cale at the time too, and I just kind of ended my run with him. And I was also in a band called Pedestrian that was, we made a couple records, and it was all like working musicians. So every time I would take a gig, it would be this kind of guilty complex, I think probably for all of us, because we all had to take gigs where you're like trying to make something happen with your band. And, but then, I've got to make money.
So you had a bunch of stuff in motion that was all like, what's the word? When a baby's, in brewing, and your thought was, man, this is nice, but now this is another project that I got to take on that's in gestation. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
But they it's basically said like, come on in, you'll be a full with everybody. And I was, and the music was so compelling. And also right at the top of that summer, we did another residency at another local club in LA called Spaceland, which is now the Satellite. And it was like they have these thing called Free Mondays, and so it was like every Monday you go and you put on a free show, and we kind of curated, or the band kind of curated the night of like kind of getting the 2 or 3 bands that were playing before us. So and at that point the band had been on local radio. KCRW had really stepped up to the plate and was really promoting it. So in Los Angeles something was happening, which I'd never seen happen before in other bands that I'd been in. Like I could go and count, I couldn't even count the number of times that I had my own bands, and we could fill a room from, even if it's like 100, 150 people, I know 75 to 80 of them. And I'm probably going to meet the other 25 or 30 by the end of the night, because Pedestrian was an amazing band. I'm really proud of the work that we did. And it was also like some of the best musicians in town. So our audience was all our fellow musicians and, some fans too, but, it was all part of our music community. Yeah. And, so when I was playing these gigs with Fitz, even the first residency I had done, of February that year, where I was covering for Ethan for that month, it was, I could tell that no one knew the people that were in the room. It was like, oh, this is just music lovers. That
was buying units, genuine buying units.
Sure. Yeah. I was like, oh, these are actual fans that know all the words to songs. And these shows were just, and then we cut to June at the Satellite 2010. And it was like, it was a sweatbox, and the energy was just so palpable. And it was, there was something happening. And it's something I think that was one of the calling cards of the band is the live show. And it was this intensity that we had, and everyone came out of those shows, just us and the audience covered in sweat, and that's where my wife, who is a big influence on me, she's got amazing taste and instinct, and she was just like, you need to do this band. This is something, because in my head I'm like, oh yeah, I really like it, do I want to even be in a band anymore? I was just in a band, and I just was, the band had ended. We took a very extended hiatus, and then I was finally like starting to get some better paying gigs, like the Five for Fighting gig. Was it paid great, and it was with great players, and the music was fun, and it was I was like, oh, I'm really starting to get to the next level as like the session hired gun guy. And I was like, oh, this is really happening. Now I'm going to not take those gigs again and be in a band again. But it was that thing. You were just like, something is here. And it took another 6 months before before it really started to break around the country. But it was kind of undeniable. And it was also this style of music that I've been wanting to play, for a long time, because it's just, music that the words were very heartfelt and, had a lot of pain. It was all about, the first album was really about, versions of breakup songs, but then the music was very cathartic, and, it was a way to like, almost empower people who were going through heartache to, say, screw you, I'm moving on, or whatever, Sure. So it was just, something. It was one of those things like, my wife thanks me, and then also is, she's like, damn it. Because the other half of it is the fact that I'm now, because I joined this band, I'm gone 2/3 of the year.
Yeah. It's a blessing and a curse.
Absolutely. That's the long version. And then, yeah.
Very cool story, man. Thank you for sharing that. And you were married at a young age.
Yeah.
Especially for a musician.
No. Oh, no, no. I was married late.
But I think she was your wife back then, though, right? Before you.
Yeah. No. I call her my wife back then.
Oh, you weren't married. You just
got married. Yeah, we weren't going to get married. We were just going to be together and have our daughter. And
I was going to say, what's wrong with you kids? Nobody gets married anymore, man.
Yeah, well, we were. I always had this ideal of doing the Sting and Trudy Styler vibe of like, oh yeah, you can just be together and like the love is all you need to hold you together, and which is all you really do need. But
absolutely.
Eventually, it was just like, no, I actually want a wife. I want you to be my wife. And so then we got married, I think it was, a year and a half ago.
Oh, that's cool. Oh, I thought, okay. So when you were saying my wife, she was your girlfrand at the time.
Yes.
She okay. I was like, wow, this guy got married. Young guy. Woo.
Yeah.
How did you, thank you. That was a really cool story, man. Very good. Mm-hmm. How did you start getting session work? Cause that's kind of hard. You were a young guy when you got session work. You don't just like show up at the studio and say, hey guys, I'm here with my bass. I'm ready.
I mean, it's plugging away. It's being out every night. So much of this. It's something I'm actually trying to do more of again because I really like it. I really enjoy it. But since I've been in this band, I've been and then right when the band was taking off, we also had our daughter, and so being gone so much, I and also having a gig that made me financially stable and not needing to hustle for gigs.
Sure.
I would just, come home and just stick with the family.
Sure.
And just, invest that time. So it's also something I'm just trying to get back out at now, which is like being out there in the world, networking, but without networking. You don't want to be just, everyone can smell the guy who's like networking.
Yeah. I know.
Versus like just hanging and doing it because you love it. I mean, I spent, there's various clubs around town that would be hot at different times and it would have scenes. And so like one of them was the Temple Bar down in Santa Monica that had this amazing scene that had a lot of world music and, just some of the best players in town were playing there and doing their projects and, everything. I mean, I was in like my rock band and whatever. So just by being out there, you just start to meet people and then, then someone says, oh, hey, will you record my demo or record my record? And so, the record may not be major label or anything like that, but part of it is just saying yes to everything. You just say yes, even if you don't think you're ready for it. You got to just say yes and figure it out. And it's just really word of mouth and, your reputation. People see you on stage and they talk to you afterwards. And, being part of the thing, being in people's mind is also another thing. You got to have the talent, you got to be ready, but you also there's a lot of guys out there with a lot of talent and good vibes. So, and also I think trying to develop a style, trying to be an individual player is always an asset. Some of the people who work the most, there's two aspects. One is like the person who can just blend into anything. And then there's the person who, does a really special thing. Like I think about like a drummer like Jay Bellarose, who's a guy based in LA, but he's played with everyone from, he's one of Pat, what's his name? The guy who did all the Oh Brother Where Art Thou soundtracks. I forgot. It'll come to me. Anyway, he's one of those guys who just works all the time, but he's got a real specific sound. He came up playing with Paula Cole, so all those old Paula Cole hits were like that sound. I was like, oh my god! I first played with that guy. I was like, oh that whole sound. He would tie these shakers around his ankle and create this huge sound while still just playing real simple and vibey. And you're like, oh, you were pushing your own boundaries, and you sound like you. Like when I first played with him with someone else, I was like, oh my God, that sounds like the rhythm section of Paula Cole, because they came up together in school, like at Berkeley. And he probably, there's part of the things that he developed his sound doing that. And so there's that side of the thing of being someone who just has a sound and someone who is just, just so proficient at every single style. I mean, you got to be proficient at a lot of styles to do that. But, I found myself playing a lot of singer-songwriter stuff and,
but you've done movies.
Well, the movie stuff is actually more is actually songs that I played records on. Like the Arthur soundtrack was the band Fitz and the Tantrums.
Okay, so it was a soundtrack. it was a soundtrack, and they included one of your songs.
Yeah. Well, for that one, we had to actually go and do it. It was the remake of Arthur, and so they needed to do Arthur's theme. The when you get lost.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many people they had to do versions of that, and I heard it was a lot, like upwards of 20. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. And for some reason, and then we were like one of the last people to cut one, and I don't know if it was they liked our version best or it was just down to the wire and like, all right, we got one, let's go. So we actually had to go in the studio and just come up with a version for that. So it was very specific, but it wasn't like me playing on the score.
Sure.
That's one thing. That's when going back to the music school conversation we had at the very beginning. One of those things that I had wished I had done was go to music school to get the ear training together at a faster pace, to get the reading up. Like those are the things. The only guys who do those gigs are the guys who can sight read well. And which is a skill I could develop, and I can kind of read, and I've taught myself all this stuff. I've had a couple great teachers in my life who pushed me, but it was all like, I have a teacher for a year. I've probably had like 2+ years of actual instruction, and the rest is all just me figuring it out. And playing with people. So that's the soundtracks are there, but it's also one of those skills. One thing I learned how to do is learn how to make a chart really fast. That's what, if you want to be a session player, you got to all right, let's learn that song within I'm like a 2 or 3 listen guy, maybe probably 2 listens of a song, like let's do it. But it's a whole skill to listen fast, make a chart so you can get back into the room and actually just start cutting the track.
Sure. It's interesting. I've interviewed a number of top session guys in Nashville, and being able to read is one of the things that many of them said, I wish I could read better, or I wish I had studied reading earlier. And the exact same thing, I could do a chart. But having that just would have made my life a little easier, and probably would have made me a little more versatile.
Pretty common thing. I mean, oftentimes with bass, with movie scores and sound, things like that, that's all written out. So most of it, unless you're really doing something kind of funky, like the Superbad soundtrack, like Lyle Workman.
Were you on that?
No, I wish that was
incredible,
that was awesome.
Man, wasn't it?
Yeah. So, but I think the way he did that was like just get the players that he loves and have some sketches. I don't know how it actually went. I don't think everything was written out. It was like trusting the players to realize this vision of like, I got these songs, the bass line. Here's the basic bass line. Now develop it. Don't quote me on any of that either, but because I was not in the room. But yeah, like just charts and reading can be such a big help, because the guys who can do it are few and far between. Yeah. Not the charts, but the reading of actual sight reading. If you do that, like one of the guys who just plays all the bass, the movie sessions, like Neil Steubenhaus, I think there's just a handful of guys that play on the electric side. That do all of that stuff.
Cool. John Cale. I didn't even know he was still around. How'd you hook up with him? And what you got to have some cool stories about working with that guy.
Dude, that guy is a legend. He's a total legend. And luckily I did know who he was when the opportunity came up. And so I was like, oh wow, this is real stuff. He's never stopped, first of all. I'm not sure where he's at now in age, somewhere in his 70s, but he has never stopped. He's given me some great examples we'll go backwards first. To get the gig was the same way I got all the other gigs, and how I got sessions was I was playing at the Temple Bar, and I'd come off stage, and a guy named Herb Graham, a fabulous drummer and a producer who was in the middle of producing John's record, Black Acetate, that came out around in 2005, I think. He saw me, came out, introduced himself, and was just like, man, yeah, you're really great. You do tours or anything like that? I'm like, sure. And he's like, yeah, because I've been working with John Cale, and, I know we're finishing up a record, and he's going to be, I think, looking for some guys. And so, if you're interested, let me know. I was like, yeah, I'm interested. So
Yeah.
it took a little while. And then he called and initially it was Herb as the drummer. And then turned out a buddy of mine, Dustin Boyer, that I'd known for many years, also was the guitar player in the band. And so that's how it happened. We got, I don't even think that's what it was. He was booked at South by Southwest at a gig. So they had a gig that needed filling. So it wasn't like, it wasn't like a big audition process. It was like, okay, we got to get the music ready for this show. And I think his previous band might have been based in New York, and I think he was now living in LA. I'm not sure exactly how it goes, because he still uses some of those guys, at times. It's like, but yeah. So we just basically went and rehearsed and played the show, and then that was it. There was no kind of like, you're in the band. It was just like, can you do the next gig? Can you do that? And then also, actually got to make it on that record because there was a song or two that was still getting finished up, or like after the record was done, he's like, wait, not quite done yet. And so we recorded. Very cool. That band got to get on that record. And that was a serious education in everything, because
he's got some miles in the studio, that guy.
He's got miles in the studio, miles
touring.
of touring, creativity. He was one of the, prolific partiers of his day, and then had also gotten sober. And, he was a record executive. He was a producer for Warner Brothers. That's the thing you don't even realize. Like, he was in Velvet Underground, or not a lot of people know, but maybe a lot of people don't. Like, he started out, he was in Velvet Underground, founded it with Lou Reed. And, but also like classically trained. Like, he came to the States as on a scholarship to Tanglewood, which is the Aaron Copland school of like modern compositions, like him and John Cage, and people like that. Like he came up, coming from this place of super avant-garde modern composition, like drone. That's where all like that drone stuff, all that Venus and Furs, like
oh man, I love that song.
Yeah, so that element was where he was coming from, and then to take that, and then he just went off and started. He produced, I believe, the first Iggy and the Stooges record. He produced, Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers. He also made a slew of solo records all throughout this. I mean, starting in like 1970 all the way till today. He's never stopped doing that. As well as making, producing for tons of other people. And it was a real education because, he had this new music he was doing, and he was still playing some of the old music. But aside from a couple of the songs, there's some songs that we just kind of like play the way it was. But often, like when we would do some of the Velvet Underground songs, like Femme Fatale was a complete reworking.
It would be like a new version.
Total new versions. And, and it was very interesting. Working with him, it took us a little while. It took him a little while to whip us into the shape, into the style and the shape that he wanted the band to do, because everyone was great players, and he gave a lot of freedom. He never really told you exactly what to play, like the exact part, but he would kind of say like, I want a thing like this. And he kind of let you do, come up with your own version of that.
So he functioned more like a producer would.
Kind of. Yeah. I mean, I always think of it kind of like what I've heard Charles Mingus did with his players, the great jazz bassist and composer. He's my favorite composer in jazz, and there's like this is a big reason is because I heard that he would tell like even his soloists like, okay, when it's your time to solo, you do your thing, but I want you to focus on like keep these three notes, or this mode is going to be the mode I want you to play in. To kind of still keep a personality of the composition throughout the thing. And it's not just my time to just go off to La La Land. It's my time to develop this story of what this song is.
That's interesting.
So I always felt like, John is very akin to that, where, you just kind of mold the band and mold the sections a little bit, especially me as a bass player, there's like a lot of freedom to kind of move around a bunch, but then there'd be times like, no, I just really need you to just lay here in the pocket and play this and just be this guy who's not exploring like the rest of us might be exploring, like his John would play primarily piano, also play a little viola and play some guitar, especially when he's on the piano. He's very prolific and could go, that's where, like a lot of his melodic improvisational stuff would happen. And we'd have these songs we'd play for like 15 minutes, like a song called Pablo Picasso, which is an old Modern Lovers song, or Jonathan Richman song.
Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers. I haven't heard that name in a long time.
Yeah, which he had produced, and it's just this great cathartic, punk. He was also so punk, but also so classically trained. So and music went all over the place, man. It was like, and also I had like keyboards, so I was actually playing like key bass and playing patches, and sometimes playing bass and keyboards at the same time and singing. And yeah, it was just when I really look back on it, it was a really creative time. You really had to be on your toes also, because he would just, never relied on just the exact arrangement. He would let things happen in the moment if they were happening, like just like anybody, even in jazz bands, it's like people can go crazy. You're still playing the form during a solo, but you still want, even if someone is just like going out and, they're going to give you like, a couple notes, it'll be like a little signature part that will lead you back in. Like we do it in Fitz and the Tantrums when our sax player goes and takes a solo. Like, oftentimes he'll have something that he'll play for the last 4 bars of his solo, and that lets everyone know, like, all right, now he's coming.
Time to come back.
Yeah. So there'll be things like that, but it was really, there's a lot of freedom within the structure of what John was doing, and the other thing I learned from the guy was just always be searching. Here's dude been doing it for 40 years, making all sorts of music, and what was his favorite track at the time was "Drop It Like It's Hot" by Pharrell and Snoop Dogg.
Yeah.
And part of it was because it was just so bare bones, and he just loves the sparsity in the air in hip hop, and especially on that track. If you go and listen to that track, it's just like there's nothing. It's just these little snaps in, like drop it like it's hot. It's like the production on that was. I remember him saying, like, listen to this track. There's nothing going on in that track, man. And I was like, yeah, that's hard to do, really hard to do. So he's always being inspired and always pushing himself, and always not just doing the music. He's making art installations for the Venice Biennale, these world renowned art exhibitions and things like that.
Did you guys ever play, man, my favorite Velvet Underground song, besides Venus and Furs, it might be just a Lou Reed song, something like Got a Gun? Do you know the song? It's like a real depressing song, but it's a like very intense melody.
Well, we played a song called Gun, but I don't.
Gun, that's it. I'm pretty sure that's it. It's
but the one I think we played. I think that might be of one of John's solo albums.
Okay, different then.
Yeah. So it may be a different one. I forgot what we played. I think we might have played "Waiting for the Man" once or twice, and "Femme Fatale." We didn't dive too deep into that catalog.
Yeah.
I think since then, since I had left, he had done like the Velvet Underground and Nico record with a string orchestra, stuff like that. But that that's another hallmark of his. Like he'll go and visit it a little bit, and he would play some of the older songs, but he really was looking more to the future, and what he's not sitting there trying to play his greatest hits.
Walking through the oldies.
Yeah. And even songs that we would play kind of like the record, like on some of his solo records, sometimes, you come into a rehearsal and it's like, all right, here we go. We're changing it up because, I'm tired of it like this. And luckily when you're constantly innovating and changing and evolving as an artist, like John has, your audience, is receptive to that.
Yeah.
It can be. So you don't pigeonhole yourself as, you know, I just have to do this, you know, which there's something to be said. Like if I go and see my favorite band, I want to hear it like it is on the record, you know, like I want to hear the song.
Yeah, but he's not that guy. He's more like a David Bowie guy. Like you're expecting the audience he attracts is totally open to just hearing whatever he's doing. I think
absolutely, and that's a beautiful thing to keep you energized in the music. Also, like most of the time, he's super appreciated in Europe. Like we've only did like 1, maybe 2 tours of the States. We do some shows in the States, but in Europe and abroad, and you know, all over the world, he's much more well known and has a deeper fan base. Also, I think just Europeans and the Brits, they have a broader spectrum of music that they're like. They're down to get weirder, and you know.
Well, I've talked to players that are either are from overseas, all over the world, or that spend a lot of time touring there, and what they have communicated to me is some version of, in Europe, it doesn't matter if you haven't done anything for them lately. They give you credit for what you've done, period. And it's not like, you know, we're here in the States. It's like, oh, you know, it's like being in sales. What have you done for me lately? Almost, you know, and they've said it's not like that. Right. The fans like appreciate you because you've done good work. It doesn't matter that it's 10 years old or 5 years old or 20 years old or 40 years old.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's really a wonderful audience to go and play for when, especially if you're someone who has any kind of pedigree. Like there's definitely a reverence for that. You know, and I've seen it in many different parts of Europe, you know, like all the way up to Scotland, playing with Ben Taylor. There was this awesome little place called the Bain Inn, I think it's called, just in the middle of nowhere. It literally felt like we were coming into this like tavern from American Werewolf in London, you know, you're just like,
which you might have been.
The fog was rolling in. Like, are we safe? You know, like, oh, you're safe in this room, you know. But like this place where just all like John Jorgensen would play there all the time. All the, you know, just a bunch of like, you know, that may not be household names very many places, but who are fabulous artists and, you know, players that deserve recognition and have an audience in this rock and roll inn. That's in the middle. That's literally like, you know, 30 miles probably from Edinburgh or something like that. It's like in the middle of nowhere. So you have to make the effort to go and see this, and people do.
That's cool. I interviewed John, by the way. He's a great guy and an amazing player.
Yeah.
Jorgensen. Are you working on anything now that you're? I mean, I know you got a ton of stuff going all the time, but anything particular you're excited about?
Yeah, you know, one thing that I've been doing on the creative end that's not just Fitz the Tantrums is some of the guys, 2 of the members of my band Pedestrian, like last year or something, we started a band called Brights, which is very similar to Pedestrian in the sonic scope. It's kind of ambient rock that, you know, can get very moody, you know, but then also get very very explosive. So we had this idea to make some music for syncs, for licensing, movies and TV. Things like that. And I think someone had come to us from like BMI or something like that, one of the publishing houses, saying, oh yeah, we could use some music that's similar to a band like Explosions in the Sky, which is a great instrumental rock band. And we're like, oh, that's very similar to what we naturally do. So we just kind of went into the studio, and you know, I think there's a few sketches that like our guitarist had, and then one song that we had from Pedestrian that I had come up with that was kind of a little too weird for, like, Pedestrian actually had vocals and songs, and it was just not quite a song, you know. And so, but we all liked the riff or whatever, and so we. The 3 of us, me, Joel Shearer, who's another amazing guitar player that you should check out, who's got a great story and a big pedigree, and Blair Cinta, another person you should know about, is a great drummer, both of whom had played with Alanis Morissette and they still are playing with everybody, you know. Edward Sharp, Josh Groban, all the, they're just working guys, but with personality, and with their own feel and vibes. It's really, really great. So we got in the studio and just composed these things. Spent like 2 days and developed some stuff. We're still about to put it out, so it should be out soon on all the proper channels. And it's called Brights, Brights. Music that's going to take a little bit of patience. It's really good for like a nice drive or something like that, because some of these songs are like 10 minutes long. And
I like that personally.
Yeah, but I mean, it speaks to what we were doing with it, which was to try to have a bunch of different movements in this song, like have 4 different spaces, 4 different colors within each song that you could put into a movie or something like that, but it's just very natural. Like with these guys, we all have a language from being in that band Pedestrian, and we also then had also formed a band and added another member. And Pedestrian also, I should go back, also had Zach Ray, who was another amazing keyboard player and guitar player. And now he's now a member of Death Cab for Cutie.
Oh, cool.
But he's played with everybody, and one of the most working session players out here in LA. Just a brilliant mind. So he was in Pedestrian, and then we also even did a record called Desktop Rulers.
That's a cool name.
Which was kind of like the anti-Pedestrian almost. Pedestrian is very emotional and kind of more like not Radiohead, but in that kind of vein of like this is serious stuff,
deep shit.
Yeah, and and then we also were like, oh, let's just do a band where we just sound like the Kinks meets the Who, but in a garage, and same vibe though. Like, let's just get in there and there's a couple song ideas, but let's write the songs in the studio and record them and just bang it out. And so we did that all, and we also added our other friend Jason Orm, who's another fabulous guitar player out here, who also now currently is still playing with Alanis Morissette, as well as many other things. So all to say, these are people that I've played with for, intimately and created music with for, a long time. So when it came time to do Brights, we just were like, it was like, we hadn't played together properly in a couple years. And it was, just like riding a bike, and the way we play together and the way we make music together is very, the way I play bass in this band is very different than the way I play bass with anybody else.
In what way?
But just the approach, like when, especially on the melodic end of things, when Joel, the way he plays guitar, he creates these beautiful pads, but also he's one of my favorite composers. Like every time he plays something, I'm like, that sounds great. I don't think I've ever heard an idea from him, and I'm serious about this, that I haven't inspired by on some level. And that's not to say that that's the case with everybody.
Sure.
Not everyone, shit's gold, as they say. But in my mind, for my money, I think he does. But the way that he does it, and kind of the way I'd like to approach that kind of music, it is active. It does have the bass has a melody, but it's not. In general, it's not supposed to be super busy. It's supposed to be more like composed ostinato, like repeating figures or things like that.
So you guys you like the mojo that you have with him?
Yeah, and that's basically what it is.
Yeah,
it's just the way, it literally, we make this type of music.
Yeah.
When left to our own devices and we get in a room and just jam, it sounds like us. And so Brights is an extension of Pedestrian, but it also allows us to explore. To not have to put that extra work in, when you actually try to turn it into a song and add a melody and add a thing, it just changes the perspective of the tune. You have to get a little bit more structured. You have to get a little bit more, I don't even know if refined is the right word, because we do try to refine these pieces of music, but there's just, all you're thinking about is what we're playing. You're not trying to leave a hole or any space for an extra melody or anything like that to come through. It's instrumental music. It's, so it's kind of just based in that. There are melodies, but the melodies are all stuff that we're playing. It's fun, you know.
I want to point something out because I always like to hear success stories, and there's one thing that you've done consistently. And I most of the people listening to this are musicians, and I want to just point this out. You're always fucking busy. And yeah, it's really important because I think a lot of times it's like people think, well, how did Joe just got that thing? Not really. And yeah, you had to meet somebody in the right place at the right time. But if you weren't there in the first place, if on your fourth or fifth job that week or project that week, that connection never takes place. And I think it's really important that, and as a guy coming from the business world, it's the same thing. You got to be the guy that kind of mentored me one time. He said, things happen from motion, not meditation.
Yeah.
And you're that guy, man. And not only that, just your energy about all this shit is so freaking high. It's awesome, man. Like, I just looked at the clock. We've been talking for an hour. I didn't even think we were on I was like, wow. I mean, I don't know any time limit, but I was like, holy shit, because your energy is like so high. It's awesome.
Oh, thank you. That's nice to hear.
Yeah.
It's still something I'm still trying to do, because I'm realizing, I've been so busy just with Fitz and the Tantrums and so focused on that I haven't done as much of the other stuff over the last batch of years. And that's one of those things like this year. This is kind of we're making a record, and so it's we call it an off year when we're not touring. We're just doing a couple gigs a month, a lot of corporate gigs and things like that. And so, that's one of my things that I guess my New Year's resolution this year is to reach back out and kind of engage more with the music community again, because it's so vibrant here in LA. That's one of the great things about this town that I've always loved, no matter what phase of life is going down. LA can get a real bad rap, from people. It's got this it has one, there's a bunch of reputations, but it's like if you actually live here and get in and you find your place. Like, I grew up here, so I've always had my place. But for people who are living here, you find there is a place for people if you can deal with the weather. I mean, if you like the weather, if you want to come out here and have the sunshine, and and don't mind driving in a car a bunch. Even still, if you don't like driving in a car, you can find the neighborhood. I live in a neighborhood where I walk around all the time.
Right. You do, because I remember the first time we spoke, I'm like, are you outside? You're like, yeah, I'm going on a walk with my daughter and my wife or something like that. You were walking through a park or something like that. I remember that, yeah.
Yeah. We just happen to live in a neighborhood. We don't just happen to. We chose to live in a neighborhood that my wife is from New York, so yeah, she's used to that.
Yeah.
And I finally got used to it too, But it's a great city with a really vibrant music community and many different scenes within the music community. There's a big rock scene. There's the big, like if you ever see, there's that movie, the documentary that came out. It was Hired Gun. I think it's on Netflix.
Great.
Yeah. So like a bunch of those people are all like that's only one small scene. Is my only issue with that documentary was that they really just focused on one part of it.
Yeah. One
scene. There's so many other styles and things that, I mean, it's also good because, like Alice Cooper's band, Eric Dover, actually, the old singer for Imperial Drag, actually was in Alice Cooper's band for many years after Imperial Drag. So he was one of those guys.
Playing guitar?
Guitar and singing, yeah. And,
cool.
But that's one scene. It also seems a little kind of, like cliche, because it is rock and there's
a little pity party too, in there, which was kind of a bit of a turnoff. Yeah.
But all to say there's even more scenes than just that.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more vibrant than it seems, than you could think. It can feel like this huge place, but there's all these little neighborhoods and all these little scenes, and people are really supportive of of the scenes. Like I was playing so much at this place called Hotel. Like I was saying, there's venues that get hot and have spots, you know. So like that, well, there was the Temple Bar, and that's not there anymore. And that was like, had a good 10-year run. And now, you know, for the last 10, 12 years has been the Hotel Cafe, which has broken a lot of great artists, and a lot of, you know, big people still go and play a small spot. But like John Merrill still go and play a set there, you know. And, you know, and it's just fantastic to be out, you know. It's a good place to be. I forgot the point now.
Well, no, I was saying about, you know, you got to, you know, this is not, you know, it's like the doctor. Why does this doctor get to charge you, you know, $40,000 for an operation when someone else could do it for 12? Well, because he's done about 4,000 of them, or how, you know, you earn it. You know, it's not just, it doesn't just like, well, I'm going to charge this, you know, and even like, I thought you were pretty candid about saying, hey, well, you know, I got a wife, I've devoted time to family, and now I got to be realistic about, you know, making sure I've got some backup plans, just because you never know what's going to happen. And, you know, this is a bulk of my time, but I want to, like, you know, crank up some other stuff again too. You know, I think that's, you know, very realistic.
Yeah. It's also just, you know, part of keeping things vital, and also being able to have, you know, especially being in one band with the same people, it's really important to go out, and for everyone to go out and do things. Everyone's writing with different people, you know, and playing with different people, and then you can come back and bring a fresh inspiration to your home base, and it's super important. You know, it's just one of those things. Like, even, you know, like I love doing cover gigs. You know, playing in cover bands, that's part of how I learned how to do what I do. You know, and you know, that's how I learned to play bass, was by just studying those records. And like, I would sit there with the Allman Brothers, and I would learn all of Stormy Monday exactly the way Barry Oakley played it on live at Fillmore East. You know, and that's, you know, it's like, you know, or Jack Bruce. You know, like I learned all, you know, Crossroads. I can play Crossroads.
That's some serious bass work going on in there, man.
Well, and it's crazy. It's beautiful. It never repeats. But that's what I did, was just doing that. So when I do a cover gig, it's like, I don't ever want to just phone it in. You come, you know, like if I'm going to go do the gig, I'm going to go, if there happens to be a set list, you know, beforehand, it's like, all right, I'm going to go and, oh, you want to do Kashmir? I'm going to go and sit and really figure out all those little things, because it's fun. It feeds my soul and it feeds my playing. And when we actually get out there and do it, you know, it's fantastic. It's that thing that I used to think every now and then, because it's a hard business. This is a hard business.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I remember, you know, after Imperial Drag, I had a couple years where I was just on a label, and I could just I'll just put another band together, and I'll just get on another label. And, I've already got the connection, so to speak. Yeah. And so I started a band with some dear friends of mine that I still play with to this day. And we just worked that for a while. And it was really hard, because you're back out there grinding it out. And trying to get people to your shows and flyering, and, you know, we used to make flyers back in the day. You know, now you just post things. But it's you know, there was times there I got really depressed about it, because I was like, I was on top of the world. I was 24 by the time I was, you know. Sure. I basically, you know, was living my dream. And then the dream felt like it was, when the band finally ended, it felt like the dream was like the rug was pulled out from under me.
Right. And like what happens now, or, you know.
I'm sitting there at 26 years old going like, oh, my failing career. Oh my God. You know, and it's like, no, if you could just know that it's always a struggle at times, there's always going to be hard times and good times. And, you know, if I could have gone back and said like, hey, just, you know, relax, just keep doing what you're doing. Just keep getting better, and, you know, things come to the people who are ready. I mean, that's what we always say in this band, in Fitz and the Tantrums. Like, none of us are spring chickens, you know. Right. We all came into this band in our mid-late 30s, or some of us, you know, a couple of us are a little younger, but you know, but the dream was always to be in a band. Yeah. You know, the dream was for me at least, was always to make it in your band. Versus, you know, I love doing the sessions. I really do. I want to do more of those. But that wasn't, you know, when I first started out, you know, I loved Kiss. That's why I play bass.
Sure.
Gene Simmons was the coolest on Destroyers, one of the greatest, some of the best bass playing ever. And my dad played bass. So I was like, oh, I'm going to be the bass player. When I'm just sitting there as like a 6-year-old and we're like just mimicking Kiss, songs, and, just playing in the living room without any instruments and broomsticks and stuff like that. That was always the dream.
Sure.
And part of that thing is that we always say in the band, like, when people ask us, what's your advice? It's like, be ready and do it, Dave. You got to do it because you have to, not because you kind of like it. It's too brutal of a business to do because you kind of like it.
Yeah.
There are times when I've been a little darker where I've been like, oh man, I kind of wish I just kept music as my hobby, and could just go play the cover gigs with a good band and do that. But even still, like, I don't think it would have been as fulfilling for me, because the juice is, if you're going to do a cover gig, to nail it and play it, to sound as close to Zeppelin, if you're going to do Zeppelin covers, as you can, and feel that, and to do that, you really need people who are players and doing it all the time. But back to what I was saying with the band, we always say, like, man, part of it is we just stayed in line. We all worked. We all had successes from all the members of Fitz and the Tantrums, and then we had lower periods where everyone's working, but you're not in anything that's like mega name or whatever, or you're just relocating and trying to reestablish yourself in a scene. You're always creating, but then the thing that we did is we never got out of line. We never stepped out of line. Just waited. And so when we were lucky that the serendipity of that band with those players at that time and that music in that moment, so much of big success of something like that, especially on a band level, is these X factors that you can't really, describe. Like my Imperial Drag didn't hit. It was a little before its time, a little after its time. I think it was a little before its time. Like if we had just put it out like a year or two later, it might have connected with more people.
Yeah.
But so you just stay in line and you keep swinging, and you just, it's crazy.
And it's like that in business too, because I've worked on some projects that have been like, why isn't this working? I'm just like, and I'm examined it and 10 ways. And sometimes it's just, man, you picked the wrong thing at the wrong time, or the right thing at the wrong, there's no explanation. Shit just happens, but you have to, expect kind of that. And, it's okay to get down on that once in a while, but you got to just, you got to get back up and keep taking swings, man, because, what is that?
Yeah.
If you're not swinging, if you're not trying, then definitely nothing's going to happen,
Absolutely. Yeah.
You grew up out there in LA itself?
Yeah, just outside LA in a small hippie town called Topanga. That's just one of the best. I couldn't have asked for a better place to grow up. I was just actually up there with my family yesterday. Took my little daughter for a walk, and it's surrounded by a giant state park.
Oh, that's cool.
And so it's just full of oak trees, and there's still deer out there and stuff, and it's just
nice.
Yeah, so I just took my family out there, and it's beautiful. Like I go back there, and it's like that's one thing about LA is there's a lot of energy in this town, and something I feel a little sensitive to energies at times, and it's like you don't realize it when you're here, but you kind of gotta raise your own energy level to meet it.
It's like New York, yeah.
Yeah, very similar to New York, and a different energy. New York is
totally different.
It is a different energy, but it's.
If you don't have any, you lose there, man.
You got to get in sync with where you are, and in Topanga, to get in sync is to actually like breathe a big sigh of relief and just go it's far away. I lived up there for a long time, even while I was gigging and trying to play multiple gigs, going back and forth to. Into town. Like I would do things, it's like 45 minutes, half hour to 45 minutes to get into Hollywood from there. So, you'd have to go in there and like you go play, You know, at one time I was in like 14 or 15 bands, you know, when I was really just gigging, you know, not in the bands, but I was like, you know, playing you know, with an artist, you know, in like, you know, I was in like 14, 15 projects at a time. So hustling and doing 2 rehearsals with 2 different artists and then a show with someone else later. And, you know, just like there'd be so many times I'd just be like, oh my God, I have 3 hours to kill. I think I'm still going to drive back to Topanga. I'm going to drive 45 minutes so I can spend an hour at home and then drive back rather than just try to kill 3 hours at a coffee shop.
Sure.
You know, so it was definitely all to say it's a real special place.
So you had a good childhood growing up and all that stuff?
It was great. Yeah, I mean, I had freedom. I lived on a creek, and across the creek was this cul-de-sac of like dilapidated ball field that had like another street with all these kids on it. And so at 4 years old, I could just say, see, I'm going to my friend's house and just walk across this creek, and just I had a lot of autonomy. I would just spend hours in the hills just following coyote trails and just, you know, just these little tiny paths that a little like, you know, 7-year-old can go and follow and just, you know, just kind of be out in nature and, you know, hang out in the creek. You know, the creek had frogs and moss and stuff. So you'd fling moss and tadpoles at each other. And there's also, you know, it's a town with a great music pedigree. It's got you know, that's where Little Feat were based out of. You know, Neil Young there's a studio down the street from my house that, you know, is always like, oh, Neil Young's going to buy the studio, you know, and there used to be a place called the Corral back in the 70s that, you know, like Spirit would play at and Canned Heat and stuff like that. So, you know, like when we first got our house, like we bought a third of an acre and when I was like 3 years old and lived in a trailer on the house for a year while my dad and mom built the house and that I grew up in. And across the street was Bernie Leadon from
the Eagles.
Yeah. So, you know, and this is like 74, 75. So it was when they're coming up. He lived there for a couple of years. I don't even remember. I just remember my mom just going like, oh yeah, Bernie lives across the street. You know?
That's funny, man. What kind of work did your dad do?
My dad is they're both retired now, but he was a cabinet maker. He made kitchen cabinets. He was a woodworker. So he did a lot of things until he found that actually late in life. I, you know, found his groove later in life. You know, he was a musician. My grandfather is actually, he's passed on, you know, for a while now, but he was a professional musician, professional piano player, you know, hosted a radio show and did, he was like Judy Garland's accompanist for like rehearsals and things like that.
Big stuff.
Yeah. And then, you know, ended his career like 20 years running a room up in Reno next to Liberace before Liberace got big. You know, he's like one of those guys. He's a piano man. And, yeah, and so my dad actually also, you know, was classically trained on piano, but then, you know, played some bass. That's also one of the reasons why I play bass, because he kind of played bass in like a folk band in the late 60s. And how he met my mom. That's how he met my mom. My mom was like go-go dancing on a table down in Manhattan Beach after a gig she was a waitress at the bar that he was playing.
That is so wild, man. That's a very California story. Very 60s, 70s California story.
Yeah. My mom grew up in North Hollywood, and her parents had moved out from Nebraska, and then my dad moved out when he was like 15, just into Hollywood, just like straight up right into Rebel Without a Cause. It was like in that era of life, and he was a cabinet maker. My mom was a registered nurse, and so you know, it was a nice, solid thing. There was always creativity out in the garage. He actually, for the first 10 years of him really doing it, which is when, you know, I was probably like 4. Like I think before that he was selling leather goods. He was like he started a business with an Italian friend of his, and they were making fine leather handbags. But he was basically a salesman. Yeah, and it was a good opportunity. That business actually was very successful. But he did that for like a year, and was just like, dude, I can't sit in an office. Just do this all my life. And he actually had my mom telling me like, oh yeah, he wasn't sure exactly what he wanted to do. And he's like, has a family to feed, and he's 40 years old. And and just meditate in the mornings and try to figure it out. And then somehow he was just like, oh, I'm going to do woodworking, and just started a shop out of his garage. And so it was also great because it was like a lot of people would come through. They were a very vibrant social scene. Everyone looked like they were in Fleetwood Mac. That was basically where I grew up in a town where you had to look like Lindsey Buckingham from the Rumors album, big faux afro, and everyone had beards, and if I think back on my childhood, it seems very sepia toned.
Funny,
like that kind of blown out, like California smoggy sunshine from all those old cigarette ads in the 70s magazines.
but so you probably got your hustle from your dad, though. It sounds like.
Yeah, well, he's always self-employed. In my life, and he always had that thing where he's like, he always had work. He always did quality work. He's one of my heroes as a human being. Just everyone loves him. He treats everyone fairly. He's a great guy, and so he always had work. He's never out of work, but he would have jobs lined up for like the next 3 months, and then after 3 months, he didn't have a job lined up. Sometimes, and then but before that 3 months came up, another job would happen. But I remember feeling a bit at tension. We talked sometimes when I was a little older, and he would just be like, "Yeah, it was, if we were everyone had everything that we needed. We never wanted for anything. But it was definitely like just solid middle class, and you just kind of feel that like, all right, you gotta work. You gotta. It's which, as being someone who's self-employed, I think I've always got that kind of like, don't be too frivolous or, with your money and things like that, because it's like, you got to make it last.
Yeah.
As a musician, it's like, it's feast or famine, and, you get a great gig and then you're living off of that for the next 2 months while you're just teaching lessons or doing whatever you got to do, until you get the next great gig.
I hear you, man.
So so I definitely get a lot of that from my dad, the kind of hustle.
Let me ask you this: what is something, Joe, that you've learned about yourself along this entire journey?
Well, I'm still learning how to do, which is actually it's better to be in touch with yourself and be in touch with your emotions and know what you want and what you need. I think I've got one of those personalities that can be very, I think I get this from my mom, who's a nurse, which is very much like, I'm going to take care of other people.
Yeah.
It's like even recently I was just like, or the last few years, I'm like, oh yeah, wait, what do I want in this situation? Because normally I'm pretty easygoing. I feel like I'm easygoing, and I've just kind of I can just let other people, as long as everyone else is happy, I'm cool.
Yeah, sure. I get that.
And so there's that, learning how to actually look inside and go. That's one of the things I aspire to still to this day, is to find more of my voice, my artistry, because, being a bass player, it's really easy to, just kind of do, you're a sideman. You're a sideman. It's like, oh yeah, I don't need to be the person up front, telling people about my life, but I do feel something in there inside me that's like, oh yeah, you do have a story to tell, and so a bit of that, and also to be, the idea of being more present in everyday life, which actually is one of those things, speaking on the musical tip, that's what I've been working on, as you're deep into a tour with a band, it's very important to, before you get on that stage, like really, don't ever forget where you are, and the fact that it can, like we just did this tour opening up for One Republic this summer, and it was just sheds, beautiful outdoors every night, it's just packed crowds. And every venue kind of looks the same because, those outdoor sheds are just like this big 10 to 20,000 seat outdoor arenas, but they all kind of, everything can blur together after a few weeks on the road. And to always remember, you know, and it's just what your day is. And you're like, oh, it is very exciting. And the audience is there and it's very kinetic, but it can also just be like, oh yeah, let's go. Let's just get out there and do our job, as opposed to like, wait, I'm living my dream, you know. And before you walk out on that stage, always remember, this is the thing. I used to look at the back of that album cover of Rumors, or in the inside sleeve. If you ever have Fleetwood Mac's Rumors and pull the inside, the record sleeve out, it's this collage of all these shots from the road of them on stage out at these outdoor festivals and things like that, and all the gear and everyone just having a good time, and you know, just that kind of vibe. And to remember to look up and go like, oh, I'm in that picture. This is my life, you know. Presence of mind, and that, you know, that really translates to everything, to, you know, time with my family, to being present for my daughter and being present for my wife and all of that, you know. But that's you know, it's also, if you're truly present in yourself and in the moment when you are making that music, whether you are making something fresh in the moment or playing something you played 1,000 times, it will be authentic.
Yeah. I know I always struggle with that of I have to remind myself to be here now, you know, to I don't worry about the past and the future anymore, but I feel like I need, and that's because of like age. Like, I don't know, when I was 50, I just started realizing, you know, you're responsible for a lot of the stress you have in your life, so you need to stop it. And I was like, okay. It's like a conversation. It was like that simple. I was like, you know what? Yeah. Self, you're right. I'm fucking done with that. It was that simple. I mean, it was that simple, but it wasn't, you know, it was 50 years of bad decision making, or, you know, not being aware of that. But I struggle still with, you know, being present. And I think a lot of it is like what you said before you go on stage. For me, I find the same thing. I have to tell myself, okay, you're going to go and do this, and you're going to enjoy this, and it's not something that comes automatically for me anyway.
No, and it's even, you know, speaking in terms of like home life. It's like, you know, like I'll be playing a gig, or I'll be doing a recording session and being in one very particular mode, but like, you know, something I aspire to do every day. And I don't feel like I always pull it off, but you know, it's like before you walk in the door and you see that little tiny person who is just, you are their everything, and they are watching everything you do. You know, it's like, oh, you got to stop, you know, and go like, okay, this is what I'm going to put this hat on now. And I'm going to go, and I'm about to walk in here and be present. I mean, even as we're talking about it, I'm like, oh yeah, I need to remind myself to do that even today. Like it's constant. You know, there's always stuff to
it's like always clutter.
It's
in your head, it's like this too much clutter. At least for me, anyway, I feel that way.
Oh no, totally. Even creatively, you know, I'm just sitting here at this, you know, in this moment, like going, like, all right, I've got a lot of things that I want to do, especially when it's just me. Like, you know, after we're done with this, you know, this is a me day to write, and I'm kind of like, where do I start? I got all this stuff, but where's the best way and best place for me to start? And actually, the best place for me to start is to go and just meditate and actually empty the mind out, and then just come, you know, and just follow whatever muse is, you know, comes from that, you know.
Well,
So
it's funny because you mentioned the little person. So my kids are much older. My kids are 20, almost 28, 26, and he's got a baby. I have a 4-year-old granddaughter, and then my daughter's 18. Okay. So they had the whole family over yesterday for Easter. All the kids there, boyfriends, girlfriends, and like I made it a point to not do any work at all, which I'm always doing some work because I'm a worker, and that's what I know. And I just spent the entire day with everybody. Didn't pick up my phone, but I had to, and it was a great day. It was wonderful, man. I had such a good time, and it was not like particularly dysfunctional for a family gathering, which was nice. And it was like at the end of the day, I told my wife, I said, you know, it was a really big thing for me to like just be present this whole thing, and I was really glad I did it. But it sounds ridiculous that I'm even saying that. Like, why should I have to do that? But if I don't, you know.
Well, no, I mean, you know, the modern modern distraction is the damn phones. You know, it's just like there's stuff on. It's just so easy to just like check in and do this thing. You know, and that's one thing that's something to aspire to is. So use your phone as a phone, and then screw the.
Facebook and Instagram.
I remember I actually remember bringing it all back to the music was like being down in a basement at a theater in Pedestrian, and we all hang out all the time, and like someone had just gotten the iPhone and had some apps, and I was like, and showed it to me. I was like, oh, cool, man, look at this, and he's just sitting there. Like, oh yeah, I got this little game or this little thing there, and you're like, oh wow, that's great. And I was just sitting there going like, what a great, we're hanging out in this room for like an hour or two waiting for whatever, and we're literally in a basement and it's nasty. I was like, oh, this is great. That's a great way to kill some time. And sure, a better way is to be sitting in a room and actually talking with everyone and laughing and. Yeah. And it's. I mean, we're all victims of it. I mean, you get on, especially with my band, we're like we live with each other for forever. We know all the stories,
Yeah.
And after a little while, you can go on to like one of our buses or something, and you just be like, oh, unless we're watching a movie, half the time, like or dressing room, just kind of waiting, and everyone's just on a phone. It's just the way it is these days, and it's like that's one thing that. That's part of the presence. You're not present if you're on that thing. You're thinking about what other people are doing, or you're trying to not think about what you don't want to think about, or just trying to occupy your mind as opposed to, or even if you're reading news or reading, even if you are bettering yourself, you're still like insular.
You're not present. Yeah.
Yeah. You're not present in what's actually happening in your life, know?
And I agree with you. I think that's super important, man.
Yeah.
Do you have any non-musical superpowers?
Let me think. Non-musical superpowers.
You got a lot of energy, man. Honestly, I'm really impressed with that.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I mean, that might be my non-musical superpower. Might be. This is going to sound really esoteric and little George Harrison-y, but my inner light might be my superpower.
No, that sounds. It is what it is.
No, but it is a thing that doesn't always show itself. Like, if I'm too involved in this, or I've got too much anxiety about X, Y, or Z, it's one of those things like, especially as you have a family and you have a house and you got responsibilities, like you can forget that if you don't work on it. But one thing I've always felt inside is that kind of like the inner light of my soul or whatever. Like there's something there that, when I'm in touch with it, can help brighten people and give them some of that energy. So that's maybe that and if it's only in my head, then what a great power to have.
Yeah, man. Right? Who cares? It's a pretty good one to hang on to, man. It doesn't matter at that point, man. No, and I'm sure it's not. If you feel that way, it's because you've gotten it validated by other people.
Yeah.
You don't just suddenly wake up and say, oh, my inner light. No, you've obviously had that experience where somebody's vibed off you and said, hey, man, this was important that you gave me this, and I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, that's actually something at this particular moment in my life I'm working on rekindling and, strengthening again and getting more in touch with. So.
Good man.
Yeah, do what you can.
Biggest business or personal win?
Well, I mean, business win, joining Fitz the Tantrums. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That was, especially at the time when it was $100 a gig, just, it was a big gamble. And I knew the band was good, but I also didn't know if it was going to translate, the style of music was going to translate beyond the borders of Los Angeles.
One question about that, and I don't know if you could answer it. You had a couple of situations leading up to that where, like you said, with I forgot the band, Imperial Drag. I'm sorry, where you were like a day late and $1 short, or a day early
Yeah.
Right. And then you had another couple of situations where it was similar to that. How much of that, I wasn't sure, do you think was prejudiced by those prior experiences?
You know, no, I think on this one I had a more specific reason for why I wasn't sure if it was going to translate. Because of seeing so many bands, because of that kind of rare groove scene that is really awesome in LA. I've just seen so many people have bands that, you know, are different versions of that.
Okay.
That are amazing bands that go out there and do it, and they can tour and they can go international and do some things, but no one's making a living. No one's making a ton of money on it. They're doing a tour. And they're really grinding, and it's like, oh yeah, you could keep doing it. It's enough. There's enough recognition to keep going with it and to do it because you love it, but it's also not going to buy you a house or anything like that.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I just, this band, because it had a bit of that Motown thing in my mind, I was partially thinking like, man, I love this. This is great. Is this going to be another one of those situations where it can get to a certain level, you know, that's just like we can go and tour in a van and, you know, we can get 100 people to show up at clubs around the country. Or you know, is there something there that can break through that? Because even still, I mean, especially on that first record, the hardest issue we had with making something happen was that no one knew exactly how to pigeonhole it, because it wasn't just a Motown revivalist. You know, it wasn't as pure as like a Sharon Jones and the Dat Kings. You know, it was never supposed to be that. It was always blended with hip hop drums and some, you know, 80s pop melodies and things like that. So it was never just one thing. But because of that, it was like one of these things, like all the radio programmers would be like, man, I love it. I don't know if it will fit on our format, you know, because you weren't able to just pigeonhole it. So my concern was a valid one, but this actually ties into my greatest personal success, which is getting together with my wife. You know, for very many reasons. You know, she's someone who's really helped me grow in ways I never thought possible for myself, and but also, you know,
how long you been together?
We've been together, God, maybe 9-10 years.
It's cool, man.
About 10 years. Yeah, maybe 10 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah, and then she, but you know, like her outside perspective, you know, to be able to say like, oh, you need to join this. This is going to be something special. That's one of her superpowers is being able to tell when something is going to go on. You know, she's got a great instinct for things like that, and my instinct can be clouded by, you know, and maybe on a subconscious level, my instinct was clouded by my past experiences that you had mentioned. Yeah. I was just curious, because it would be hard not to have some of that, like. Well, no, it's true. It was also clouded by the fact that I was in another band that I was, Pedestrian, that I was very passionate about, and we were out there grinding it. We couldn't make anything happen. We had all the connections. We had all the stuff. We had the music. We just, for some reason, it couldn't happen, and I was kind of tired of the grind. Yeah. So that was a big part of why I was like, I don't know. But there was that thing that, you know, that indescribable thing when you just know, like, oh, it's connecting with people, and it's fun as hell to play, you know, and to be in that band and play and to share that energy with people and to give people a music that will let them forget about their troubles of their day, and, you know, really give them that experience that is worth them saving their money to come out to the show. You know, that's, you know, it's one thing we always try to remember when we're going out and doing these shows. It's like, no matter whether we've been out there for 2 months or 2 days, it's like, always remember, like, the people who are coming there, this is the best night of their week, month, maybe even their year. Yeah. Maybe they're good. You know, it's like, you never know. And so that's why you got to show up for them. you know, because they're the ones that have given me all the success I've had.
Right, and making it happen.
I put in the work. They showed up and appreciated it.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Well, you're in the service business.
Yeah, I mean, do
you have any hobbies outside of music?
Yeah, I love biking. I like I've gotten into a small bit of rock climbing. You know, we did actually on the road. Like Fitz, our singer, got way into it last year, and when we did that 10-week tour, you know, one of the ways to really cut the monotony. Also, we were opening up, so we didn't have after like the first 2 sound checks, we didn't even have a sound check. So we had.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because they just, you know, everything's all the boards these days have memory. They all have memory. So, you know, and all the venues are similar. So as long as they just adjust the frequencies for the subtle differences, it's going to sound pretty much the same. So, yeah, we just had hours to kill, and rock climbing is really a great thing. Like bouldering, really kind of, you know, just like climbing without the rope and not going too high, but still, it's like. Something really great about it that challenges me. I'm not very good at it yet, but it's doesn't matter because it's like, it's, you know, you got to learn to trust yourself, trust your body, trust your strength, your own personal strength, that you're going to be able to hold yourself up on these things. And in it, there's still an element of fear that is there that makes it so that you can't think about anything else. And also, when you have to break through that fear. Like I actually realized through this that I have like a fear of heights, kind of, you know, I get a little vertigo if I get, you know, if I stand under like the forum or something like that, I'm like, whoa, that's, you know, I can get a little dizzy. And to break through that, it's just really great. Also, you know, really loved mountain biking. I just have a regular bike now, but, you know, like just getting out there and getting kind of meditative and, you know, especially when you're climbing a hill, there's nothing you can think about except climbing that hill, and the rhythm of that, you know, even with walking is a hobby, and it's one of my favorite ways to create music is, that's where actually when I don't have an instrument in my hand and I'm just walking, and all of a sudden the rhythm of my walk, or even running, you know, I'll just be like, oh, and all of a sudden some kind of melody will come into my head. Yeah. You know, but it's, you know, it's these other things that help feed. Sure. Life and make you a more complete person, and you know, can help all the other aspects of yourself out.
Yeah, I think it's so important to be active, man.
Yeah. And yoga's a big one too, but I haven't done it recently. I just was doing it with my daughter this morning a little bit, and I was like, cool. I need to do some yoga, man. My body's well,
man, I'm going to ask you 2 more questions. I really appreciate your time and your candor. Have you ever had a specific experience that changed your life or altered the way you think about things?
I mean, one thing that altered my life was meeting my wife, you know, like, and it was, you know, it completely, you know, changed me for the better, you know, in a way of, you know, just learning, you know, I've never learned to grow as much as when I'm with her, because her example is always to, you know, she's very honest with herself and is always working on trying to better herself. You know, to a varying degree, she is a human being. We all, you know, it's like sometimes you do, sometimes you're in that zone, sometimes you're not, but it's always a part of what she's done. And some of the things that, like when she moved out to California, I was like more in tune with like my spirituality and things like that. And then somewhere along the line, I kind of tucked it away for a few years, it seemed like. And then she got way into it, and she was the one that's actually been bringing me back and reconnecting me. So, yeah. Don't know if that's exactly what you're looking for, but that's definitely
what I'm looking for is what comes out of your mouth, man. There's no what I'm looking for about this show, man. It's whatever's real, you know? Yeah. And the last question, Joe, what's the biggest change in your personality over the last 10 years, and how much of this change was deliberate and how much is a natural part of aging?
Let me think. Well, I mean, the biggest change is just becoming a father, and all that comes with that. Part of it is, learning to, like, the first lesson I had to learn how to deal the realization that I had to take someone else the rest of my life. Like, I had that responsibility.
Yeah.
It's not the thing that tell you when you are about to have it. It's always like, oh, it's great, blah, blah, blah. But then there's a very real weight that came with that in the beginning, where I was like, oh man, this is serious. And, like, especially when kids are babies.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, wow, that's like, if a little baby gets sick, it's like, they get a little fever. That's a big deal. And learning how to deal with those emotions, was a big adjustment to me. And then also to ride the highs of that, of being a father, and which were very easy to access as well. All you got to do is look at this little baby and, watch them do the simplest thing, and just like, oh my God, it's magic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think also a big thing that I've really, really had to learn, and this is a big lesson for any musician out there, which everyone who is going to be a touring musician has to cope with and deal with on some level, is the transitions of coming home and being away. And it all comes back down to what we were talking about, which is presence. I think that's, the short answer of your question is that the biggest change is that I've become more present in my life, and more present for myself and more present for my family. But that comes with a lot of work.
Yeah.
And a lot of, like, we've done a lot to, to deal with, like, the transitions. When you're gone, you can stay as connected as you can to your family, but you are just not there physically. You're physically not there. And your family adjusts, and because, as everyone does, you have to adapt. They adapt to, me being gone and my wife having to do all of the stuff and make the decisions and do that. And then I would come home and, like, you try to reinsert yourself into this world. And to find that balance and find the best way to do it, and the best way to energetically be, like, I would kind of overcompensate and kind of try to be Superman, and in that would not be present.
Yeah.
I'd be trying to be over present and, like, oh, let me handle this, let me do that. And it's like, no, just relax and just be here with us is the most important thing. So that's one thing that
that's a guy and girl thing too, I think, because men we want to fix shit and solve problems, improve our value, and women are just like, no, just be with me.
It's true, yeah. I'm still learning the lesson of, like, when they are telling you their problems, they just want you to truly listen and not offer the solution. Unless they say, what do you think? That's so. Still learning that lesson. That's a valuable lesson for all you men out there.
Yeah. Oh, and you know what? My wife, like, comes to me now. She says, listen, I want to talk to you, but I just want you to listen. And I was like, I'm so happy she says that, because I don't feel like I don't feel like, okay, I want to, like, I have a job now, and I don't want to let you down. And, like, she takes that, which is really helpful when she started doing that.
I'm going to use that. That's a great one.
Oh, because it's
invaluable.
We've with 25 years though. It took us like 20 to figure that out.
That's so invaluable.
It is.
We are Neanderthals. We're just, the dudes are Neanderthals. No matter how elevated you may think we are, or we aspire to be, at our core, we're just Neanderthals. We don't get it. We don't get so much. And hats off to the ladies for being connected to themselves on such a level. That's one of the things I'm just trying to hang out with the ladies now.
Or she'll complain about a friend, and I'll be like, that bitch. And then she's like, no, she's my friend. I'm just, blowing off steam. I'm like, no, she's a bitch for doing that. And she's like, no, you got to And I'm like, okay, so, and I'm, just the whole involved, just, just trying to improve.
No,
she knows my barometer, so she can like tweak me before the conversation. It's like, okay,
right.
I don't want you to get angry. I'm just going to tell you, blow off some steam. Like, well, okay. Because I used to be like, if she's bitching, like I'm sure your wife complains about a friend, and I'd be like,
oh yeah,
taking it on. I'm like, she doesn't deserve to. She's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. No, it's like this is just today, and tomorrow will be better. And
right.
This is just a weird thing.
Right. So you have arguments with your friends? No, not like that. And I'm like, of course I do at some point, But anyway, man, I really appreciate your time, man. I can't thank you enough. You're an awesome guy. I'm glad we got to connect. I want to tell people, when is okay, first of all, Fitz The Tantrums is going on tour now, so please check out Joe and support Joe and the band Fitz The Tantrums. They are going on a tour now. Then they're going to be in the studio making an album, and then I would imagine you'll re-crank up the end of 18 or early 19 for the big tour.
Yeah, as soon as the songs come,
I hear you.
Or the one song. Songs are coming. You got to wait for the one song where you're like, all right, now we got something.
And Brights, that'll be on SoundCloud at some point soon?
I'll put it on SoundCloud very soon, and then also, very soon it should be on, Spotify and Apple Music and all that stuff.
Great.
As soon as we get our shit together.
Great. No, that's cool. And that's Joe's project. He talked about the ambient, as I never say that right, instrumental mood music, which is really cool stuff, where it's just got 4 colors in each song, and he's doing his thing there and having a good groove. Man, thank you very much. I appreciate how real you've been, man. Thank you very much.
Oh, dude, do what I can, man. Thank you. So thank you so much for having me, man. This is fun. I could do it for a great many more hours. Well,
man, when you get
hope to do it again in the future.
Yeah, you will, man. You come on. We got something to promote from Joe Karnes. We'll get you right back on here. Everybody,
that sounds great.
For sure, man. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. I want to thank Joe Karnes again for spending time with us. Go, please support Joe and Fitz and the Tantrums and Brights, which is his other project coming out soon. He's a very hardworking guy and good person, ton of experience. And that's it. Go to everyonelovesguitar.com. Sign up to get notified about future episodes, along with some early product announcements and discounts. And remember, this is important. Happiness is a choice. So choose wisely. Be nice, go play your guitar, and have some fun. And your bass. Till next time, peace and love, everybody. And I'm out. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.